The wind screamed across the mountain peak like a dying wolf, tearing at her thin dress as they bound her wrists to the ancient stone altar. Ophelia Darkmoon did not cry. She had no tears left for the pack that had rejected her, for the man who had called her worthless, for the family that had turned their backs when she needed them most. The ropes bit into her pale skin, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the hollow ache that had taken residence in her chest where her heart used to be. Below, in the valley shrouded by mist and twilight, her former pack members hurried away like shadows fleeing the coming darkness. They did not look back. Not once. She was their sacrifice now, their offering to the wild beasts that roamed these forbidden mountains. The Omega no one wanted. The woman deemed too weak, too broken, too cursed to deserve a place among them. The sky above her was bleeding into dusk, streaks of crimson and violet painting the clouds as if the heavens themselves mourned what was happening. Ophelia closed her eyes and let the cold seep into her bones. Perhaps this was mercy. Perhaps the mountain would claim her quickly, and she would finally know peace. But then the wind shifted. It carried something on its breath that made every hair on her body stand at attention. A scent, rich and dark like ancient forests after rain, touched with smoke and something primal that called to a part of her she had tried to bury. Her wolf, silent and dormant for so long, suddenly stirred within her consciousness, like a creature waking from hibernation. Somewhere in the darkness below, something was moving, something powerful, something that had caught her scent on the wind and was coming. The Alpha King had begun his hunt. Orion's Silverclaw stood at the base of the mountain, his massive frame still as carved granite as he lifted his face to the wind. His long black hair whipped around his shoulders, and his dark eyes narrowed as he processed what his senses were telling him. There, high above, where the sacrificial altar had stood for generations, a scent unlike anything he had encountered in his 30 years of existence. Wild jasmine and moonlight, fear and defiance braided together, and underneath it all, something that made his wolf snarl with possessive hunger. Omega, but not just any Omega. His men stood behind him, warriors who had seen him tear through enemies without mercy, who knew him as the king who had united the northern territories through strength and cunning. They watched him now with confusion as he stood frozen, his entire body rigid with an intensity they had never witnessed. "Your Majesty?" His second-in-command, Marcus, ventured cautiously. The scouts reported unusual activity. A pack from the lowlands performed a sacrifice ritual. Should we investigate? Orion did not answer. He could not. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to move, to climb, to reach the source of that scent before it was too late. His wolf was no longer under his control. It was feral with need, with recognition, with something that felt like destiny clawing its way out of his chest. Without a word, he shifted. Bones cracked and reformed, his body expanding into the largest wolf any of them had ever seen. Black as midnight with eyes that glowed like molten gold, he was a creature of legend and nightmare. He did not wait for his men to follow. He simply ran. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. The mountain was treacherous, but he moved like liquid shadow, powerful legs eating up the distance, claws finding purchase on stone and ice. The scent grew stronger with every leap, every bound upward. His heart hammered against his ribs with an urgency that bordered on panic. Something was wrong. She was in danger. His mate was in danger. The word echoed through his mind like a bell, and he knew it was true. Whoever this woman was, whatever circumstances had brought her to this peak, she belonged to him. Fate had written it in the stars and sealed it in the scent that was driving him mad with the need to reach her. Ophelia heard it before she saw it. The sound of something massive moving through the darkness with supernatural speed. Her heart, which had been so resigned to death moments ago, suddenly kicked into a frantic rhythm. The ropes around her wrists seemed impossibly tight now, her breath coming in short gasps as fear flooded her system. This was it, the beast that would end her. But when the creature finally emerged onto the plateau, Stepping into the dying light with a grace that belied its enormous size, she found she could not look away. The wolf was magnificent, terrifying and beautiful in equal measure, with fur that seemed to absorb the darkness around it, and eyes that burned with an intelligence that was painfully, impossibly human. It approached slowly, each step deliberate, and she could see the way its massive chest heaved with exertion from the climb. Steam rose from its body in the cold mountain air. When it was close enough that she could have reached out and touched it if her hands were free, it stopped. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Ophelia felt something crack open inside her chest, something she had thought was dead forever. Hope. Recognition. A connection so profound it made her previous understanding of the word mate seem like a child's imitation of the real thing. The wolf's eyes softened, and then it was shifting. She watched in amazement as the creature transformed, bones and muscle reforming into the shape of a man, the most magnificent man she had ever seen. He stood before her, chest bare and covered in old scars that spoke of countless battles, his long black hair falling past his shoulders, a beard framing a face that was all sharp angles and masculine beauty. He was easily over 6.5 feet tall, built like a warrior from ancient myths, and when his eyes met hers, she saw both the predator and something infinitely gentle. "You're real," he breathed, his voice rough like gravel and honey mixed together. His hands came up to the ropes binding her wrists, and she noticed they were shaking slightly. This massive, powerful man was trembling as he worked to free her. "I thought I might have imagined you. Who are you?" Ophelia whispered, her voice hoarse from cold and disuse. "Orion Silverclaw." The ropes fell away, and his hands immediately went to her wrists, his touch impossibly gentle as he examined the raw skin there. His jaw clenched with visible anger. "Alpha King of the Northern Territories, and you are my mate." She wanted to laugh. She wanted to cry. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was nobody's mate, that her own pack had literally tied her to a rock and left her to die because she was so worthless. But the words died in her throat when he suddenly pulled her against his chest, wrapping his massive arms around her shaking body. He was so warm. She had been cold for so long. She had forgotten what warmth felt like. His scent enveloped her, that rich forest smell mixed with something uniquely him, and her wolf finally woke up completely. The creature inside her stretched and purred, pressing against her consciousness with joy she had never felt from it before. "What pack did this to you?" His voice was still gentle, but she could hear the rage underneath it. Controlled, barely leashed fury that promised violence to whoever had harmed her. "Shadowmere," she whispered against his chest. "They said I was cursed, that my Omega status brought bad luck. When the harvests failed and sickness came to the pack, they blamed me." She felt him tense, felt the growl that rumbled through his chest like distant thunder. "And your family?" "Agreed with them." The words tasted like ash. "My father was the one who tied the knots." For a moment, she thought he might shift again, might run back down the mountain and tear her former pack apart with his bare hands. The violence radiated off him in waves. But then he took a deep breath, and when he pulled back to look at her face, his expression was tender. "I will deal with them," he said, and it was not a threat, but a promise. "But first, I need to get you warm and safe. Can you walk?" She nodded, though in truth she was not sure. Her legs felt like water, her entire body shaking from cold and shock, and the overwhelming presence of this man who had appeared out of nowhere and claimed her as his mate. He seemed to sense her uncertainty, because he swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. "My men are waiting below with supplies," he murmured, already moving across the plateau toward the path down. "We'll get you warm, fed, and then we're going to my territory. No one will ever hurt you again, Ophelia. I swear it on my life. How do you know my name?" she asked, her head resting against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "Your scent told me everything I needed to know." He pressed his lips to her forehead, and she felt that gentle touch all the way down to her toes. "You're mine now, and I take care of what's mine." The descent was easier than the climb had been, though Orion kept her wrapped in his warmth the entire time. His men, when they finally reached them, looked at her with shock and then immediate deference. They could sense what she was to their king, and their reactions told her everything she needed to know about what kind of leader Orion was. They respected him, perhaps even feared him, but they would follow his commands without question. Marcus approached with a thick fur cloak, which Orion immediately wrapped around her before setting her down by the fire they had built. Someone handed her hot tea, and she wrapped her frozen fingers around the cup, letting the steam warm her face. Orion knelt beside her, still shirtless despite the cold, apparently unbothered by the temperature. His eyes never left her face, studying her with an intensity that should have made her uncomfortable, but instead made her feel safe, seen, valued. "Tell me about yourself," he said softly, his hand coming up to brush a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear. "I want to know everything." So she told him, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence as she realized he was truly listening. She told him about growing up in Shadowmere Pack, about being the only Omega born in 20 years, about how her status had made her both precious and scorned, how she had been promised to the Beta's son Derek, who had seemed kind until the troubles began, how quickly he had turned on her, had been the loudest voice calling her cursed. She told him about the isolation, about being locked away so her bad luck would not spread, about the slow starvation and the cold nights alone, about the morning they had dragged her from her cell and carried her up the mountain, her father's face empty of all emotion as he bound her to the altar. Orion listened to it all, his expression growing darker with every word, but his touch remained gentle. His hand found hers, his fingers lacing through hers, and she marveled at how such a large, dangerous man could be so careful with her. "They will answer for this," he said when she finally fell silent. "All of them." "I don't want revenge," Ophelia whispered. "I just want to forget. I want to move forward." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then we'll move forward. Together. But Ophelia, you need to understand something." He cupped her face in his large hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with heartbreaking tenderness. "What they told you was a lie. You are not cursed. You are not worthless. You are precious and powerful and mine, my mate, my queen. And I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that to you." Tears finally came then, spilling down her cheeks in hot tracks. He wiped them away with his thumbs, his expression fierce with devotion. "Don't cry, little wolf," he murmured. "You're safe now. I've got you." That night she slept wrapped in furs beside the fire, with Orion's body curved protectively around hers. She woke several times, momentarily disoriented, only to feel his arm tighten around her waist and hear his low voice murmuring soothing words against her hair. Each time, she relaxed back into his warmth, marveling at how natural it felt to be held by him. How right. They began the journey to his territory at dawn. Orion had offered to let her ride, but she insisted on walking, needing to prove to herself that she was strong enough. He stayed close, his presence a constant warmth at her side, his hand finding hers whenever the path grew difficult. His men treated her with careful respect, and she realized they were taking their cues from their king. The way he looked at her, the way he touched her, the gentle tone he used only with her, all of it communicated clearly that she was precious, protected, his. But she also saw glimpses of the other side of him. When Marcus reported that they had spotted scouts from a rival pack in the area, Orion's entire demeanor changed. The gentleman vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. His voice when he gave orders was sharp as a blade. His eyes went hard. He was every inch the warrior king who had conquered the northern territories. Yet the moment he turned back to her, checking to make sure she was all right, the softness returned. It was like watching two different men inhabit the same body, and she found herself fascinated by the duality. They stopped for a rest at midday, and Ophelia found herself sitting on a fallen log while Orion knelt before her, examining her feet with a frown. "You should have told me you were in pain," he said, his fingers gentle as they probed a blister on her heel. "It's nothing," she protested. "I've endured worse." His eyes flashed up to hers, and she saw anger there. Not at her, but for her. At everyone who had ever made her think pain was something to be silently endured. That was before, he said firmly. Before me. Before us. You will never have to endure alone again. He called over one of his men, issuing quiet orders, and within minutes they had brought supplies. He tended to her feet himself, applying salve and wrapping them carefully, his large hands incredibly gentle. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, watching him work. "You're a king. Surely you have people who could—" "Because you're mine to care for," he interrupted, looking up at her with those intense dark eyes. "And I don't trust anyone else to do it right. Besides," his lips curved into a small smile, "I like taking care of you. It makes my wolf happy." She felt heat rise in her cheeks at his words, at the intimacy of the moment. He seemed to notice because his smile widened, his hand sliding up her calf in a caress that made her breath catch. "You're beautiful when you blush," he murmured. "I'm going to spend a lot of time making you blush, little wolf." The promise in his voice made her shiver for entirely different reasons than cold. They reached the borders of his territory by the third day. Ophelia could feel the change in the air, could sense the power that thrummed through the land. This was pack territory, protected and marked, and the strength of it took her breath away. Orion's packlands were nothing like Shadowmere. Where her former home had been small and struggling, his territory sprawled across valleys and forests, dotted with villages and farmland. The pack house itself was more of a fortress, built of stone and timber, imposing and beautiful against the mountain backdrop. People came out to greet them as they approached, and Ophelia felt her anxiety spike. They would see her for what she was, an Omega, weak, cursed. But Orion seemed to sense her fear because his arm came around her waist, pulling her firmly against his side. "Breathe," he murmured in her ear. "They're going to love you, and if they don't, I'll make them." Despite her nervousness, she felt her lips twitch at that. His complete confidence was infectious. The pack members did stare, but not with the disdain she was used to. They looked curious, excited. And when Orion introduced her as his mate, their future queen, the cheers that went up made her eyes burn with unexpected tears. Inside the pack house, Orion led her to his private quarters, a suite of rooms that were surprisingly warm and comfortable despite their size. There was a massive bed piled with furs, a fireplace already crackling with warmth, and windows that looked out over the valley. "This is our room now," he said, watching her take it all in. "I'll have your things brought up once you have things. For now, I've had the women prepare a bath for you. You must be exhausted." She was. Bone-deep exhaustion that came from 3 days of travel and years of trauma. But more than that, she was overwhelmed. This man, this powerful alpha king, was treating her like she was something precious, like she mattered. The bath was heaven. Hot water scented with herbs, soap that actually lathered soft towels. She soaked until her fingers pruned, washing away the grime and the memories of the mountain peak. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a robe that was far too large for her, she found fresh clothes laid out on the bed. Simple but well made. Soft fabrics in deep greens and blues. And they fit her perfectly, which meant Orion had somehow communicated her size to someone. The attention to detail made her chest ache. She found him on the balcony, staring out at his lands with his hands braced on the stone railing. He had bathed as well, his long black hair still damp, wearing clean clothes that did nothing to hide the powerful lines of his body. "Better?" he asked without turning around, somehow sensing her presence. "Much better." She moved to stand beside him, following his gaze across the valley. "It's beautiful here." "It is." He was quiet for a moment, then turned to look at her. "Ophelia, I need you to understand something. The mate bond between us. It's real. You feel it, don't you? The pull. The recognition." She nodded slowly. She did feel it. Had felt it from the moment their eyes met on that mountain peak. A connection that transcended logic and reason. "I'm not going to force you into anything," he continued, his voice serious. "I know you've been through hell. I know you need time to heal, to trust. I can give you that time. But I also need you to know that I'm all in. Completely. Irrevocably. You're it for me, Ophelia Darkmoon. My mate. My queen. My everything. The intensity in his eyes stole her breath. She had never had anyone look at her like that. Like she was the center of their universe. I don't know how to be a queen, she whispered. I don't know how to be anyone's mate. I'm just a rejected Omega who nearly died on a mountain. No. He turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. You're a survivor. You're strong enough to have endured years of abuse and still have kindness in your heart. You're brave enough to have faced death without begging. You're my mate, Ophelia. That makes you extraordinary. Then he kissed her. It was gentle at first, a soft press of lips that sent electricity racing through her veins. But when she gasped, her hands coming up to clutch at his chest, he deepened it. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against his hard body, and she felt the careful control in the way he held her, like she was something infinitely precious that might break if he gripped too tight. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against hers, his eyes closed. I've been wanting to do that since I first laid eyes on you, he murmured. You taste like moonlight and hope. She laughed, breathless and a little giddy. That doesn't make any sense. Neither does the fact that I've known you for 3 days and can't imagine my life without you. But here we are. He pressed another kiss to her forehead. Come on. You need food and rest. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. Dinner was brought to their quarters, and they ate together on the balcony as the sun set over the mountains. Orion told her stories about his pack, about the work they had done to unite the northern territories, about his hopes for the future. She found herself relaxing, laughing even, as he described some of the more ridiculous challenges he had faced from stubborn pack leaders. You're good at this, she said during a lull in the conversation, at making me forget everything that happened, at making me feel normal. His expression softened. You are normal, Ophelia. What happened to you, what they did to you, that wasn't normal. This is normal. Talking, laughing, being together. This is how it should have always been for you. Later, when exhaustion finally pulled at her, he insisted she take the bed while he made himself comfortable on the couch. She protested, but he was immovable. When you're ready, we'll share the bed, he said gently. But not tonight. Not until you choose it. Until then, I sleep here, where I can keep you safe but give you space. She wanted to argue, but she was also grateful. This powerful man who could have demanded anything from her was instead offering her control, choice, respect. Good night, Orion, she whispered from the massive bed, already half asleep in the pile of soft furs. Good night, little wolf. Sweet dreams. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Orion had pack business to attend to, but he made sure someone was always with Ophelia. Usually it was Lyra, one of the pack's senior females, who took it upon herself to help Ophelia adjust to her new life. Lyra was everything Ophelia had never had. Warm, maternal, endlessly patient. She taught Ophelia about the pack's customs, introduced her to the other women, helped her find her footing. Under Lyra's gentle guidance, Ophelia began to unfurl like a flower that had been kept in darkness, finally finding sun. But it was the evenings with Orion that she treasured most. He would return from his duties and seek her out immediately, as if he could not bear to be away from her any longer than necessary. They would walk through his lands together, his hand always finding hers, pointing out landmarks and sharing more stories. The third evening, he brought her wildflowers he had picked himself during a patrol. His massive hands, so capable of violence, handled the delicate stems with infinite care as he presented them to her. She took them with trembling fingers, tears pricking her eyes because no one had ever given her flowers before. They reminded me of you, he said softly, brushing a thumb across her cheek to catch a fallen tear. Delicate but resilient, beautiful, surviving despite the harsh conditions. She stood on her toes and kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and growing affection into it. He responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist, lifting her slightly so she did not have to strain. When they finally broke apart, both breathless. His eyes were dark with desire, but also infinite tenderness. "You undo me, little wolf," he murmured against her lips. Completely and utterly. Another evening, he took her to a hot spring hidden deep in the forest, a place he said few knew about. The water was heated by volcanic activity beneath the earth, steam rising in ghostly spirals into the cool night air. The pool was surrounded by smooth stones and moss, lit only by moonlight filtering through the canopy above. "I thought you might enjoy it," he said, watching her face. "A place where you can relax without anyone watching, without anyone judging." She turned to him, seeing the vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. He wanted to please her. This powerful king was seeking her approval like it was the most important thing in the world. "Will you join me?" she asked, and watched his eyes flare with heat. They undressed with their backs to each other, maintaining some modesty despite the mate bond humming between them. But when Ophelia slipped into the water, sighing at the perfect temperature, Orion turned to look at her. She saw his gaze track over what he could see of her shoulders and neck above the water, saw the restraint it took for him to keep his distance. He entered the water on the opposite side, giving her space. But the spring was not large. They sat with perhaps 4 feet between them. The heat of the water nothing compared to the heat building in the air. "Tell me something about yourself no one else knows," Ophelia said, wanting to know him. All of him. Orion was quiet for a long moment, steam curling around his broad shoulders. "I'm afraid," he finally admitted, his voice low. Terrified, actually. Of what? She could not imagine this man being afraid of anything. Of failing you. Of not being enough. Of you waking up one day and realizing you settled for a brute who only knows violence and strategy. His eyes met hers across the water. "You make me want to be soft, Ophelia. But I don't know if I know how. Not really." Her heart cracked open at his honesty. She moved through the water toward him, watching his eyes widen slightly as she came closer. When she was directly in front of him, she reached out and placed her hand over his heart. "You are enough," she said fiercely. "More than enough. You climbed a mountain for me. You've been nothing but gentle and patient. You pick me flowers and bring me to secret springs. You hold me when I have nightmares, and you never demand more than I'm ready to give. If that's not soft, I don't know what is." His hand came up to cover hers, pressing it more firmly against his chest. She could feel his heart racing beneath her palm. "I dream about you," he confessed, his other hand coming up to cup her face. "Every night. I dream about making you smile, making you laugh, making you understand how precious you are. I dream about touching you, tasting you, making you mine in every way possible. But I also dream about simply holding you, talking with you, growing old beside you. You've become my every thought, Ophelia, my every breath." She kissed him then, there in the moonlit water, and it was different from their previous kisses. This one held promise, intention. When his hands slid around her waist, pulling her closer, she went willingly. The feel of his bare skin against hers, separated only by the water, made her gasp. "Tell me to stop," he groaned against her mouth. "And I will. Always. You have all the power here, little wolf, all of it." "I don't want you to stop," she whispered. "I want to be close to you. I want to feel alive." They did not complete the bond that night, but they explored each other with hands and lips, learning what made the other sigh and moan. Orion worshipped her like she was something sacred, his touch reverent, his kisses burning trails across her skin. And Ophelia discovered the joy of making this powerful man tremble, of feeling his restraint snap and rebuild repeatedly as he fought to maintain control. When they finally left the spring hours later, both flushed and breathless, Orion wrapped her in his cloak and carried her back to the pack house. She felt different, lighter, more herself than she had ever been. In the days that followed, their connection deepened. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, but the tension between them grew sweeter, more urgent. A kiss here, a tender embrace there, always careful, always checking her reactions. It made her fall for him even harder, this careful dance he was performing to make her feel safe. One evening, About 2 weeks after her arrival, Ophelia found herself in the Pack Library. It was a beautiful room, filled with books and scrolls, warm lamplight casting shadows across the walls. She was curled up in a chair by the fire, reading about Pack history when Orion found her. "There you are," he said, his voice warm with affection. "I've been looking everywhere for you." She smiled up at him. "Sorry, I got lost in the books. Did you know your great-great-grandfather helped establish the first peace treaty between the Northern and Eastern Territories?" "I did." He moved to sit on the arm of her chair, his hand coming down to play with her hair. The casual intimacy of the gesture made her heart skip. "But I like hearing you excited about it." She leaned into his touch, marveling at how natural it felt now to be close to him. Over the past 2 weeks, they had fallen into a rhythm of small touches and stolen moments, his hand finding hers during walks, his arm around her shoulders when they sat together. Kisses that started gentle and grew heated before he would pull back, breathing hard, giving her space she was not sure she wanted anymore. "Tell me about your family, your parents." His expression shifted, becoming distant. "They died when I was young. A challenge from a rival pack that turned bloody. My uncle raised me, trained me to be the king I needed to be to hold these territories together." "I'm sorry," she whispered, her hand finding his. "That must have been hard." "It was, but it made me who I am. It taught me that strength isn't just about physical power. It's about being strong enough to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Strong enough to be gentle when gentleness is needed." His eyes met hers. Strong enough to be vulnerable with the right person. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then Orion slid off the arm of the chair and knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. "Ophelia, these past 2 weeks have been the happiest of my life. Just being near you, talking with you, watching you come alive as you realize you're safe here. It's everything I never knew I needed." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles. His beard was soft against her skin, sending shivers up her arms. "I know we said we would take things slow, but I need you to know that I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably. And I will wait as long as you need me to wait, but I wanted you to know." Her breath caught in her throat. Love. He loved her. This powerful, magnificent man loved her. "Orion," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. She slid from the chair to kneel with him on the floor, their faces level now. "I don't know how to say this. I'm not good with words like you are. But being here, with you, it's like waking up from a nightmare. Every day I feel more like myself. No, that's not right. Every day I feel like I'm discovering who I could have been all along if I had been loved and valued. And that's because of you. Because you see me as precious when everyone else saw me as cursed." She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling in his. "I'm falling in love with you too. I think I started falling the moment you looked at me on that mountain peak, and I saw gentleness instead of disgust in your eyes." The joy that blazed across his face was breathtaking. He surged forward, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her head spin. This kiss was different from the gentle ones they had shared before. This was claiming and promising and celebrating all at once. His hands tangled in her blonde hair, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. She gasped against his mouth, and he took advantage, his tongue sweeping in to taste her. She had never been kissed like this, with such hunger and restraint fighting for dominance. One of his hands slid down her back, pressing her closer, and she could feel the tremor running through his powerful frame. "Ophelia," he groaned against her lips, his forehead pressing to hers as he fought for control. "You're killing me, little wolf. Do you have any idea what you do to me?" "Show me," she whispered, surprised by her own boldness. "I want to know. I want to feel it." His eyes darkened to black, his wolf rising to the surface. "Are you sure? Because if we go down this path right now, I don't know if I'll be able to stop." "Then don't stop," she said, and watch something snap in him. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, setting her on the edge of the large reading table. Books scattered, forgotten. He stepped between her knees, his hands framing her face as he kissed her again. deeper this time, more possessive. His lips moved from her mouth to her jaw, down her throat, and she arched into him with a soft cry. "You taste like moonlight," he murmured against her skin, his beard scratching deliciously. "Like everything I've ever wanted and never thought I'd have." His hands roamed her body over her dress, reverent but possessive, mapping every curve. When his thumb brushed the side of her breast, she gasped, and he paused immediately, his eyes searching hers. "Too much?" he asked roughly. "Not enough," she admitted, and felt him shudder. But then he was pulling back, breathing hard, resting his forehead against hers. "Not like this," he said, his voice strained. "Not in the library where anyone could walk in. When I make you mine, Ophelia, it will be in our bed, where I can take my time worshiping every inch of you, where I can make you scream my name without worrying about the entire pack hearing." The promise in his words made heat pool low in her belly. She nodded, understanding even through the haze of desire that he was right. This was too important to rush. "I want to complete the mate bond," he said roughly. "But only when you're ready, when you want it as much as I do. No pressure, Ophelia. This is your choice." She knew what he was asking. The mate bond, when completed, would tie them together forever. It was not something to be entered into lightly. But as she looked into his dark eyes, saw the love and devotion shining there, she realized she had never been more certain of anything in her life. "I'm ready," she whispered. "I want this. I want you. All of you." The growl that rumbled through his chest was pure satisfaction. He stood, sweeping her into his arms, and carried her from the library. The walk to their quarters seemed to take forever, and no time at all. Pack members they passed smiled knowingly, and Ophelia felt heat flood her cheeks, but she did not look away from Orion's face. In their room, he set her down gently beside the bed, his hands coming up to cup her face. "Are you sure?" he asked one more time. "Because once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine and I'll be yours, bound together for life." "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I've never been more sure of anything." What followed was a claiming as old as time itself, gentle and fierce, passionate and tender, a joining that transcended the physical and became something spiritual. When their bond finally snapped into place, Ophelia gasped at the intensity of it. She could feel him now, feel his emotions as clearly as her own. The depth of his love, his devotion, his absolute commitment to her well-being. It was overwhelming and beautiful and perfect. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the furs, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. His hand stroked through her hair, gentle and soothing. "How do you feel?" he murmured. "Complete," she answered honestly. "Like I finally found the piece of me that was missing." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "That's exactly how I feel. You're my miracle, Ophelia. My second chance at believing in something good." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, the bond between them thrumming with contentment and love. The next morning, the pack could sense the completed bond. The congratulations were immediate and enthusiastic, and Ophelia found herself swept up in preparations for a proper mating ceremony. The private claiming was binding, but tradition demanded a public celebration. She woke slowly, her body deliciously sore in ways she had never experienced. Orion was already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Good morning, my mate," he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. His free hand came up to trace her features with infinite gentleness. "Did I hurt you? Was I too rough?" "No," she said quickly, catching his hand and pressing a kiss to his palm. "You were perfect." It was perfect. Relief flooded his features, but she could see the lingering concern. This powerful man who had claimed her with such passion last night was now worried he had been too forceful. "I can feel you now," she said softly, placing her hand over her heart. "Right here. Your emotions, your presence. It's like you're a part of me now." "I am a part of you," he said, covering her hand with his. "As you are a part of me. Forever, Ophelia. No matter what comes, we face it together." He pulled her closer, tucking her head under his chin, his arms wrapped securely around her. She could feel his heart beating steady and strong beneath her ear, could sense through their new bond the depth of his love, his contentment, his absolute commitment to her. "I never thought I could have this," he admitted quietly. "After my parents died, after years of fighting and politics and maintaining control through strength alone, I thought I was too damaged for something like love, too hardened, too focused on duty to deserve softness." She tilted her head up to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. "You're not damaged. You're strong. And that strength allows you to be gentle with me. You hold the safety of thousands in your hands, Orion. But with me, you're careful, tender. That takes more strength than any battle." He kissed her then, slow and deep, pouring all his emotion into it. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "You're my miracle," he whispered. "My second chance at believing in something good. I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret you," she said fiercely. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." They stayed in bed longer than they should have, learning the new dimensions of their bond, talking about everything and nothing, stealing kisses and caresses. When they finally emerged, the pack's knowing smiles made Ophelia blush, but Orion wore his satisfaction openly, his hand possessive on her waist, announcing to everyone that she was his and he was hers. The days leading up to the ceremony were a whirlwind. Lyra and the other women helped her choose a dress, taught her the rituals she would need to perform, prepared her for her new role as their queen. Ophelia was nervous, but Orion was a constant presence, stealing moments with her throughout the day, reassuring her with his touch and his words. The ceremony itself was held under the full moon, with the entire pack gathered to witness. Ophelia wore a dress of silver and white, her blonde hair decorated with flowers and jewels. When she walked through the crowd to where Orion waited, she saw nothing but love and acceptance on the faces around her. Orion stood at the center of the gathering, devastatingly handsome in his formal attire, his long black hair braided with silver, his beard trimmed. But it was the expression on his face when he saw her that made her knees weak. Pure adoration and possessive pride. The ceremony was beautiful, full of ancient words and symbolic rituals. They exchanged vows under the moonlight, their hands bound together with silver cord, their wolves rising together in a harmonious howl that echoed across the valley. When the pack elder pronounced them bonded mates and future king and queen, the cheers that went up could probably be heard in the next territory. Orion pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly despite their audience. And Ophelia felt joy so pure it brought tears to her eyes. This was real. This was hers. This magnificent man. This wonderful pack. This beautiful life. "I love you, my queen," Orion whispered against her lips. "I love you too, my king," she whispered back. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, but eventually Orion pulled her away, leading her back to their quarters with barely restrained impatience. His eyes promised her a very thorough private celebration, and she found herself blushing and laughing as he swept her off her feet and carried her over the threshold. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Ophelia's life. She settled into her role as Orion's mate and the pack's future queen with surprising ease. The pack members, seeing how their king treasured her, treated her with genuine respect and affection. She was no longer the cursed Omega. She was their Luna, beloved and valued. But she also saw more of Orion's other side, the warrior king who ruled with an iron fist when necessary. There was an incident with a neighboring pack that tried to test their borders, and Ophelia watched from the pack house as Orion led his warriors to meet them. The man who returned hours later was covered in blood, his eyes cold and hard, radiating lethal power. His men looked at him with fear and respect, but when his gaze found her waiting for him, everything softened. He came to her immediately, pulling her into his arms despite the blood and dirt. "Are you all right?" she asked, her hands coming up to frame his face. "I am now," he murmured, breathing in her scent like it was the only thing that could calm him. "I was worried you would be frightened. Seeing me like this," she shook her head. "I'm not frightened of you. I know who you have to be for them. But I also know who you are with me. Both sides of you are mine, Orion, the king and the mate. I love all of you." The relief and love in his eyes made her ache. He kissed her then, not caring about their audience, pouring all his emotions into it. Later, as she helped him clean the blood away, she understood the weight he carried. He had to be fierce and unyielding to keep his pack safe, to maintain the peace he had fought so hard to create. But with her, he could be soft. With her, he could let down his guard. She was his sanctuary, just as he was hers. It was about a month after their mating ceremony when Marcus brought news that made Orion's expression go icy. "The Shadowmere pack has requested an audience," Marcus said carefully. "They claim they want to establish trade relations with our territory." Ophelia felt her blood go cold. Shadowmere, her former pack, the people who had left her to die. Orion's hand found hers immediately, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. "Deny them," he said flatly. "Tell them the Northern Territory has no interest in relations with packs who practice human sacrifice." "Wait," Ophelia said quietly. Both men turned to look at her. She took a deep breath. "Let them come. I want to face them. I need to." "Ophelia, you don't have to," Orion said gently. "I can handle this without you ever having to see them again." "I know, but I want to. I need them to see what I've become, what they threw away." She looked up at him. "I'm not that scared broken Omega anymore. I'm your mate, your queen, and I want them to know it." Pride blazed in his eyes. He brought her hand to his lips. "Then we'll face them together." The delegation from Shadowmere arrived 3 days later. Ophelia stood beside Orion on the dais in the great hall, dressed in royal finery, every inch the queen she had become. When the Shadowmere wolves were brought in, she watched their expressions shift from confusion to shock to horror as they recognized her. Her father was among them. So was Derek, the man who had been promised to her, who had called her cursed. They all stared at her like they were seeing a ghost. Orion, for his part, was the picture of cold authority. He lounged in his throne like a great cat, radiating power and danger, his hand possessively wrapped around Ophelia's as she sat in her own throne beside him. "Shadowmere pack." Orion's voice rang out, hard and unforgiving. "You requested an audience. Speak." The pack alpha, a man named Edmund who had presided over Ophelia's sacrifice, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, we come seeking trade relations between our packs. We have heard of the prosperity of the Northern Territory and You hoped to profit from an alliance with us," Orion interrupted coldly. "Tell me, Edmund, is it your custom to sacrifice members of your own pack?" Edmund paled. "Your Majesty, I assure you that was a unique situation. The woman was cursed and—" "Her name is Ophelia," Orion said, his voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "She is my mate and your queen, and she was never cursed. The only curse on your pack was your own stupidity and cruelty." You could have heard a pin drop in the hall. Edmund's eyes darted to Ophelia, really seeing her now, seeing the jewels in her hair, the fine dress, the way she sat with perfect posture beside the most powerful alpha in the north, seeing what they had thrown away. "That's impossible," Derek burst out. "She's just an Omega. She's nothing." The growl that ripped from Orion's chest made every wolf in the room flinch. He was on his feet in an instant, and suddenly the room was flooded with his power, his dominance, his barely restrained violence. "Watch your tongue," he snarled, "or I will remove it from your head. That is my mate you're speaking about. My queen. And she is worth more than your entire pathetic pack combined." Ophelia stood as well, placing a calming hand on Orion's arm. She felt his rage through their bond, felt his wolf howling for blood. But she also felt his love for her, his need to protect her, his fury at anyone who had ever made her feel less than precious. "It's all right," she said softly, and immediately his attention was on her, the rage banking slightly. She turned to face her former pack. "You came here hoping to find opportunity. Instead, you found judgment. You're right that I was once nothing in your eyes. Less than nothing. You tied me to a rock and left me to die because I was convenient to blame for your failures. She moved to stand at the edge of the dais, looking down at them. But you were wrong. I was never cursed. I was never the cause of your troubles. And now I'm the queen of the most powerful pack in the north, mated to a king who values me above all else. So who was really cursed? Me? Or you, for being too blind to see what you had? The silence that followed her words was deafening. Her father would not even meet her eyes. Derek looked like he might be sick. You will not get your trade agreement, Orion said coldly, moving to stand behind Ophelia, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders in a clear show of support and possession. The Northern Territory wants nothing to do with packs who abuse their own members. Consider yourselves fortunate that I'm not declaring war on you for what you did to my mate. The only reason Shadowmere still stands is because Ophelia has a forgiving heart. But make no mistake, if I hear of you practicing such barbaric rituals again, I will personally see to your pack's dissolution. Now get out of my sight. The Shadowmere wolves practically fled from the hall. Ophelia watched them go and felt nothing. No anger, no pain, no longing for what might have been. They were her past, and she had left them behind the moment Orion found her on that mountain peak. When the doors finally closed behind them, Orion turned her in his arms, his eyes searching her face. Are you all right? He asked gently. All traces of the cold king gone, replaced by her devoted mate. I'm perfect, she said honestly. Thank you for letting me do that. I needed to face them as your equal, not as their victim. You were always their equal, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They were just too stupid to see it. That night, in the privacy of their quarters, Orion was particularly tender with her. He worshipped her with his hands and mouth, murmuring words of love and devotion against her skin, making sure she knew exactly how precious she was to him. You are everything, he whispered, as they lay tangled together afterwards. My love, my life, my reason for existing. I would burn down the world for you. I know, she whispered back, her fingers tracing the scars on his chest. I feel it through our bond. Every moment of every day, I feel how much you love me. It's almost overwhelming. Get used to it, he said with a smile, because I'm never going to stop. The seasons changed, and Ophelia flourished. She discovered she had a gift for pack management, for mediating disputes and organizing resources. The pack members came to her with their problems, and she found she loved helping them, loved being useful and valued. She also trained. At Orion's insistence, she learned to fight, to defend herself. Her Omega Wolf was smaller than the others, but she was fast and clever. Orion himself often sparred with her, always careful, always proud of her progress. You're magnificent, he told her one afternoon as she managed to land a hit on him during training. The other warriors watching cheered for their queen. Absolutely magnificent. She laughed, flushed and happy, and he pulled her into his arms despite their audience, kissing her thoroughly. It was almost 6 months after their mating when Ophelia realized something had changed. She woke one morning feeling different, her senses sharper, her emotions heightened. When she turned to find Orion already awake, watching her with an expression of wonder, she knew he had sensed it too. You're pregnant, he whispered, his hand coming to rest on her still flat belly. I can smell it, the change in your scent. Pregnant. She was carrying his child, their child. The knowledge hit her like a wave, bringing tears to her eyes. Are you happy? She asked, needing to hear it. Happy? He laughed, the sound full of joy. Ophelia, I'm ecstatic, terrified and thrilled and so in love with you I can barely breathe. You're giving me a family, something I thought I'd lost forever when my parents died. You're giving me everything. He made love to her then, slow and reverent, treating her like she was made of spun glass. His hands roamed her body with new purpose, pausing to rest on her belly, his eyes filled with wonder at the life growing inside her. I'm going to be a father, he whispered against her skin, pressing kisses across her stomach. Our child is going to grow here, safe and loved. They'll never know what it's like to be unwanted or unloved. Never. The fierce promise in his voice made her cry, happy tears that he kissed away with infinite tenderness. Afterwards, he held her close, his hand never leaving her belly. "I'm going to be impossible, you know," he murmured. "Overprotective and overbearing. I won't be able to help it." She smiled against his chest. "I know, and I'll tell you when you're being ridiculous. But I also love that you care so much, that you want to protect us. Always," he vowed, his voice rough with emotion. "I will always protect you both, with my life, if necessary." Over the following weeks, as her belly began to swell with their child, Orion became exactly as impossible as he had promised. But there were tender moments, too. Late at night, when he thought she was sleeping, she would feel his hand on her belly, feel him talking softly to their unborn child, telling them stories about their mother's strength and beauty. One evening, she caught him doing it. His large hand was splayed across her rounded stomach, his voice a low rumble as he spoke. "You're going to love your mother so much," he was saying. "She's the strongest person I know. She survived things that would have broken lesser people, and she still has the capacity to love, to be kind. You're lucky to have her. We both are." "Orion," she whispered, and he looked up, startled to find her awake. "Did I wake you?" he asked, concern immediate on his face. "No. I love listening to you talk to them." She covered his hand with hers. "You're going to be an amazing father." His eyes softened. "I hope so. I want to give them everything. Safety, love, a childhood filled with laughter. I want them to grow up knowing they're cherished." "They will," she assured him, "because they'll have you, have us." He shifted, moving up to kiss her gently. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "Both of you. More than I have words to express." The pregnancy was announced to the pack that evening, and the celebration that erupted was immediate and joyous. Ophelia found herself embraced by pack members, congratulated and fussed over. Lyra cried happy tears, already planning all the ways she would help with the baby. As the months passed and her belly grew, Orion became exactly as impossible as he had promised. He barely let her out of his sight, growled at anyone who came too close, insisted she rest constantly. It should have been annoying, but instead, Ophelia found it endearing. This powerful king, reduced to an anxious mate fussing over her comfort. One evening, as she sat on their balcony with his head in her lap, she stroked through his long black hair and smiled down at him. "You know I'm not going to break, right?" she teased. "I know," he grumbled, "but you're carrying the most precious thing in the world. Our child, our future. Forgive me for being cautious. You're forgiven." She leaned down to kiss him. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only 3 times. You're slipping." But his eyes were warm with affection. "I love you," she said again. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me when I thought I was unlovable." He sat up, turning to face her properly, his hands cupping her face. "You saved me too, you know. I was so focused on being strong, on being the king my pack needed. I forgot what it was like to be soft, to be gentle. You gave that back to me. You made me whole." Their daughter was born on the first day of spring, during a thunderstorm that shook the pack house. Orion refused to leave Ophelia's side through the entire labor, holding her hand, murmuring encouragement, looking more terrified than she had ever seen him. When the baby finally emerged, her first cry piercing the air, Ophelia watched Orion's face transform. The midwife placed the baby in his arms, and this fierce warrior king, this man who had killed without hesitation to protect his pack, looked down at the tiny bundle with tears streaming down his face. "She's perfect," he choked out. "Ophelia, look at her. She's absolutely perfect." Their daughter had her mother's blonde hair and her father's dark eyes. She was small but healthy, her little fists waving as she squirmed in her father's careful hold. "What should we name her?" Ophelia asked, exhausted but deliriously happy. Orion looked up at her, his expression soft with wonder. "Luna, for the moon that brought us together. Luna Silverclaw." "Luna," Ophelia repeated. "It's perfect." The first few months of parenthood were exhausting and beautiful. Orion was a devoted father, taking to the role with the same intensity he brought to everything else. He could often be found in the nursery at odd hours, holding Luna while she slept, singing softly to her in the old language, his entire being focused on the tiny life they had created. Watching him with their daughter made Ophelia fall in love with him all over again. This fierce king, so gentle with his child, so patient, so loving. One night, she found him on the balcony, Luna asleep against his bare chest, his hand supporting her tiny body. The moon was full overhead, painting them both in silver light. "You're going to spoil her," Ophelia said softly, moving to join them. "Absolutely," he agreed without shame. "She's my princess. She deserves to be spoiled." Ophelia leaned against his side, looking down at their sleeping daughter. "Do you ever think about that night on the mountain? About how different things could have been?" "Every day," he said quietly. "If I had been a few minutes later. If the wind had shifted differently, and I hadn't caught your scent. If you hadn't survived until I got there." He shuddered. "I don't like to think about it, because a world without you in it is not a world worth living in. But I did survive," she reminded him. "We both did. And now we have this. A family. A future. Love. Love," he repeated, looking down at her with eyes that held the universe. "Yes, we have love. More than I ever dreamed possible." Luna stirred in his arms, making a small noise, and Orion immediately began swaying gently, humming under his breath until she settled again. The casual competence of it, the pure devotion, made Ophelia's heart squeeze. "You're an amazing father," she whispered. "I'm trying to be. I want her to grow up knowing she's loved, knowing she's valued, knowing she can be anything she wants to be." His eyes met Ophelia's. "I want her to never doubt her worth the way you had to." "She won't," Ophelia said with certainty. "Because she has you. She has us. She'll grow up surrounded by love and strength and protection. She'll know her value because we'll show her every single day." As Luna grew, she proved to be a perfect blend of her parents. She had Ophelia's gentle spirit and Orion's fierce determination. The pack adored her, and she was never without aunts and uncles willing to play with her, to teach her, to love her. Ophelia watched Orion with their daughter and saw the way he balanced being a strong king with being a loving father. He could be addressing his warriors one moment, all cold authority and strategic brilliance, and the next he would be on the floor of the nursery, letting Luna climb all over him while he made silly faces to hear her laugh. The duality that had fascinated Ophelia from the beginning had not diminished. If anything, it had become more pronounced. To the world, Orion Silverclaw was the Alpha King, powerful and unyielding. But to her and Luna, he was simply theirs, warm and loving and devoted. On their first anniversary, Orion arranged for Luna to stay with Lyra for the night and took Ophelia back to the mountain peak where they had met. They stood together on the plateau, looking at the altar where she had been left to die. "I come here sometimes," Orion admitted quietly, "when I need to remember how lucky I am. How close I came to losing you before I ever found you." Ophelia leaned against his side, his arm coming around her automatically. "It feels like a lifetime ago. Like that scared, broken woman was someone else entirely. She was you," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But she was also the woman brave enough to survive, strong enough to choose love when it was offered. You've always been remarkable, Ophelia. I just gave you the space to see it yourself." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "You gave me everything. A home, a family, love, purpose. You took a woman everyone else saw as worthless and made her a queen." "No," he corrected gently. "You were always a queen. I just gave you the crown to match." They made love there on the mountain peak, under the stars, in the exact spot where their story had begun. It was a claiming and a celebration, a reclamation of a place that had once meant death and turning it into a symbol of life and love. Afterwards, wrapped in his cloak, Ophelia rested against Orion's chest and looked up at the stars. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked softly. I didn't used to, he admitted. I thought strength and strategy were all that mattered, that the world was what you made of it through sheer force of will. His arms tightened around her. But then I caught your scent on the wind, and everything I thought I knew changed. Yes, I believe in fate now, because you were meant to be mine, and I was meant to find you. Nothing else makes sense. I believe in it too, she whispered. I think even when I was at my lowest, even when I thought I wanted to die, some part of me was holding on, waiting for you. My soul knew you were coming. They stayed on the mountain until dawn, watching the sun rise over the valleys. As light spilled across the land, Ophelia thought about how far she had come, from rejected Omega to beloved queen, from broken and alone to whole and cherished, from a woman left to die on a mountain peak to a woman who had found the love of her life in the very jaws of death. Ready to go home? Orion asked, helping her to her feet. Yes, she said, taking his hand. Let's go home. As they descended the mountain together, Ophelia looked back one last time at the peak, the place where she had been left to die, the place where she had been reborn, the place where her story had truly begun. She would never return to this mountain again. She did not need to. It had given her everything she needed. It had given her Orion. Years passed, and their family grew. 2 more children joined Luna, a son and another daughter, each one loved and cherished. Ophelia's role as queen became as natural as breathing. She ruled beside Orion with wisdom and compassion, beloved by their pack. The Shadowmere pack eventually fell apart, torn down by their own cruelty and mismanagement. Ophelia felt nothing when she heard the news. They were less than memories now, ghosts of a past that no longer had power over her. One evening, when Luna was 15 and already showing signs of being as strong and capable as her father, Ophelia found herself back on the balcony of their quarters. The same balcony where she had stood so many times over the years, watching the sun set over their lands. Orion joined her, his hair now threaded with silver, lines around his eyes from years of laughter and love. But he was still the same magnificent man who had climbed a mountain to find her, still fierce and gentle, powerful and tender. What are you thinking about? He asked, pulling her back against his chest, his arms coming around her. Everything, she said softly. How it all started. How lucky I am. How grateful. I'm the lucky one, he murmured into her hair. You gave me a life I never knew I wanted. A family, a home, a reason to be gentle. She turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his bearded face. There was gray in the black now, but she loved every strand of it. Loved the proof that they had lived and loved and built a life together. I would do it all again, she said fiercely. Every moment of pain, every second of fear, if it meant I ended up here with you. You'll never have to, he promised, just as fierce. I've got you. I've always got you. From that mountain peak to the end of time, you're mine and I'm yours. As the sun set and the stars began to emerge, Ophelia rested her head against her mate's chest and listened to his heartbeat, strong and steady and sure, the rhythm that had become the soundtrack of her life. She had been rejected by her birth pack, left on a mountain to die, considered worthless and cursed. But she had been found by a king who saw her value, who loved her fiercely and completely, who had spent every day since showing her exactly how precious she was, from rejected Omega to beloved queen, from broken to whole, from alone to cherished. It was a journey that had started in darkness and ended in light, and she would not change a single moment of it. The end came not with tragedy, but with peace. Years later, when they were old and gray, when their children had children of their own, Orion and Ophelia went to sleep one night wrapped in each other's arms, as they had been every night for decades. And they simply never woke up. The pack mourned, but there was also celebration, because they had lived fully, loved completely, left a legacy of strength and compassion that would endure for generations. Luna, now Alpha of the Northern Territory, stood on that familiar balcony the night after her parents' deaths and looked up at the stars. Thank you, she whispered to the moon, for bringing them together, for the mountain peak where their story began. for giving us the most beautiful example of love the world has ever seen. The wind whispered through the valley, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and ancient forests. And if you listened carefully, you could almost hear two wolves howling together. Their voices joined forever in a harmony that transcended death. Somewhere in the space between heartbeats, between moonrise and starfall, two souls who had found each other against all odds danced together for eternity. The rejected Omega and the Alpha King who had hunted her wild scent and found his destiny. Their story had ended. But their love would live on forever, woven into the very fabric of the pack they had built, the family they had created, the lives they had touched, a testament to the power of fate, the strength of love, and the beauty of finding home in another person's arms. From mountain peak to forever, theirs was a love story for the ages. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.